So I'm Pastor Josh Blair. I grew up at First Lutheran in Hinckley, and started going to a church through an outreach program that Bill was actually a huge part of, and then ran for a while after, I had started coming. So I've known Bill since I was like this big, and he probably is like, oh, this is crazy that Josh is here as a pastor now. So you guys know, a very close friend that's, I call my family, my sister was a member at Del Grove. So my nephew one of my nephews was confirmed there, one was baptized there, and really close. And then of course Pastor Brenda, who's known me also since I was really young, grew up, or was a member at Del Grove before becoming a pastor. So there is some connection here into what you guys are doing and into your community. I am currently the associate pastor at First Lutheran in Duluth. I'm overseeing all the children's ministry, the family, youth family, all of that. Like Deacon Colleen said, that she and I are considered, well, I'm not considered a mission developer, I'm considered a mission redeveloper, where the BLC saw gifts in me to help churches move through transition into something new, into different ways of doing church. So I went through some special trainings with that, and then on my internship year for seminary, I was assigned an internship down in southern Minnesota in a town called Glenville, to a congregation that could not afford a pastor any longer, and an intern was their option. The intern stipend was what they could do. So I was there on my own as their pastor, as an intern. Partway through my internship, my supervisor, who was at two other congregations, a 2-point parish outside of the town of Glenville, left, and I took on all three and merged them into a 3-point parish. They are in 3 years now, and they are doing very well. Their finances are much healthier than they were. They've seen membership growth. They're really becoming a force in the community. They've started backpack programs together, and they're doing all these initiatives to be a vital part of the community. So I did this once, so that's why back, I think, Bill, a year or two ago, you had called me and you're like, hey, I think you did this. Can you tell me a little bit about it? And I think you guys have maybe even looked at our parish agreement as well. So I'm here. I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm open to listening to what God is up to, and helping you guys see what God may be up to with all of you. So that's the time. It's just a time of waiting, and it's in this time of waiting where you guys get to decide what you're going to do, how you're going to be, how you are going to build this place up to be the best place for that year. So in Glenville, when I was entering into this process, I was actually going to go do this other internship thing that was like mission redevelopment oriented in Oregon, which I wasn't really excited about Oregon. And then this other round, the way internships work is that you get a bunch of profiles and you interview with them, and then you kind of put why you think you'd be good here in this place, and then the seminary decides where to send you. And so the seminary was going to send me to Oregon because I had this special thing, and but then this other round of internship sites came out, and Glenville, First in Glenville, had got their paperwork in late, which is typical of First in Glenville, if you know them. But when I got that email, I read their paperwork, and I'm like, there's something here. There's something about this place. There's something special about them that I want to go be a part of. And so I went through this process, and I met with somebody from the seminary, and I kind of told her what was going on, and she's like, Josh, you don't talk about them, you talk about we. And so I think this is probably what you should put as your first choice. So I did, and I ended up going there. And, First in Glenville, when I walked in, it was kind of run down. I flipped on the light switch in my office, and the lights didn't need turned on because the valves were all bad. And they were original to the building. These are way better than the thing. They were original to the 1950 school part of the building. So it was, just kind of, there wasn't a lot of hope there. They'd been kind of told that there isn't a pastor, you guys can't afford a pastor. They had a bad situation where they tried to afford a pastor that wanted like $100,000 a year, which Colleen and I talked about is absolutely crazy. But they went in this situation, they got burned, and so they were in a bad place. But there was this hope there with a lot of people. There were a lot of people that had ideas, they had things that they wanted to do, but they've been told no, or they've been told this isn't who we are. We can't do it because there's not money, or we can't do it because of this, or we can't do it because of that. So one of the first things I did was started saying yes. Like, yeah, let's go do it. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. So we started on this journey, and one of the things to think about, like they were in the same spot where I hear some of you that we have to do this for survival. How are we going to survive? What are we going to do? I'm going to tell you, I think that's the wrong question. Because this is God's church, and it's in God's hands whether or not this church is going to survive. The question is, how are we going to live? Right? What are we going to do to be vibrant? What are we going to do to be alive? What are we going to do to live? And that's where these questions started to come in. How are we living? Instead of how are we focusing on holding on so tight to make sure that we survive? Because they were so in survival mode that they forgot to live. They forgot to actually be the church. They forgot to actually do things. Right? They were so focused on, like, we might not make it. We have to have all this money saved and things like that. But really, they had tons of money, and there was no reason they couldn't fix the lights. So one of the first things we did was fix the lights. I told them, I'm like, counsel, if you're dating somebody, do you want to bring them home if you can't even turn on the lights? So why would another member want to bring somebody in here when they can't even turn on the lights and you're embarrassed about the place of your worship? Like, we gotta own this place as if it's ours. We gotta treat it like it's our own. We have to take pride in this. And you guys have a beautiful building. Del Grove, you guys have a beautiful building. I've only seen Bethlehem from the outside. I haven't been inside.
Bethlehem has a beautiful building.
I've seen pictures, but you guys have beautiful spaces to be proud of, to want to bring people into. So it's finding that pride in yourself and figuring out how to live. With these congregations, when we started just saying yes, we started doing the trunk or treat, we started up Sunday school again, we started confirmation again. We got a youth room put in, and we opened the youth room so that it was right across the hall from my office, and when I was there, it would just be open, and if kids came in, they came in. So it was like kind of a drop-in center. There were these places where we created a place to be. Another huge thing is that we got involved in the community, and a lot of this was me because I started just as a ramification of being an intern and trying to survive on an intern's pay, I started sub-teaching at the school. So I started to get to know all the kids in this small school, and then sub-teaching led to helping drive a school bus, where somehow I got roped into that. And we started to build these things, and the kids were the ones that started to really catch the vision. They were the ones that were like, yeah, this place could be good. This place can be much more than it is. And they started to invite other kids, and then when I was subbing in the school, they're like, yeah, this is my pastor, Pastor Josh. And soon it wasn't Mr. Blair anymore, it was Pastor Josh. And then one day we were I was teaching shop, and they started talking about confirmation and asking questions, and then these other kids are asking questions that don't go to church, and then the kids from the other two churches where my supervisor were, they're like, why can't we just do confirmation together? It's so much more fun when we have other people here to be with. When we have our friends here. And it sounds like you guys are already getting that, right? They started leading. They started to ask the question of, why can't we just be together? Why do we have to be apart? And it was through those kids that then started to talk to their parents. And then when the other pastor left, the Senate said, Josh, you have to stay away from them and you can have nothing to do with them. And I'm like, okay, I'm an intern. I'm not gonna do it. I just want to go back up north. And then the kid the kids were getting on their parents, and the parents went to the bishop and said, "Bishop, why are we telling us this? Why can't we be together? Why can't Pastor Josh help us with confirmation? We're in the same town, our kids go to the same school." And the bishop's like, "You know what? Let's do it. Let's see what happens." So we brought him in, and we all started having confirmation together. And then the kids started inviting kids. We took confirmation at the church I was at. We had 3 kids. The other church, they had 5. We took it to 32 kids. They were inviting people. They caught that spark. And then the parents started to catch the spark. And they're like, maybe we should talk about this. So when we started these conversations about 3-point, we didn't talk about how this is going to save us. Instead, we talked about what good it could do for us. You know, having a joint choir, the quilting groups. You know, 2 of the churches, their quilting groups had folded because they didn't have enough people, and the other church had a quilting group still. But they were starting to go down. And it's like, well, you have quilters from here that used to like to quilt. You have quilters from here that used to like to quilt. They can't do it alone anymore. Why don't we have one group? And we started to think about all the things that can work together, work better, that we can have again, all the opportunities, the things that we could do, the ministries that we could do if we were together. And we started to dream. We started to think about all of the things that would be better, all the ways that we could help each other out. And we worked from there. Now, in this process, we got together. We had 3 people from each congregation that came together to form a team. And we met every other week for 3 hours at a time for 6 months. And we met after every meeting. We took notes of everything that was said, and we sent that out to each congregation so that everybody knew what was going on. So that it was very transparent, so that there was no questions about what was said, about this church trying to take over this church, or this, you know, because there's rumors, oh yeah, they're just doing this so that we can close, we had First Bethlehem in Deer Creek Valley, so that we can close Bethlehem. You know, the Senate just wants to close Bethlehem. Well, the Senate had nothing to do with this conversation, so the Senate wasn't trying to close Bethlehem. You know, and when we heard that rumor, we were able to point back to the notes and say, that isn't anything that we've talked about. You've had these notes, it's not out there. So the transparency was one of the things. We also had a couple different times where we met all 3 congregations. We did like a 3-congregation meeting, and we met to discuss and answer questions for what people were wondering. And we took a poll. We had them all stand up, and on this side of the sanctuary is, I will never do this over my dead body. The middle is maybe, and over here was all for it. And we gauged each week, or each time we had met, and I think we met twice, all together to gauge where people were at. And then the ones who said, over my dead body, we asked, well, why? What are your hang-ups? What things aren't working in this for you? What things are we not thinking of in this group that are concerning you? So we could figure out where those sticking points were for people. I was a pastor for all 3 of those churches. We also didn't worry about time, of how much time I spent with this church, or this church. It was when this church has something going on, I was going to be there and be a part of that. And then this church might have something going on later. And this church might not have something big going on where I have to spend a lot of time with them for 2 months. But it's okay because it's all about us. It's not about each one of us. We had this collective mindset. Our parish slogan was one God, one mission, 3 congregations, one church. We were 3 congregations, but we were one church. So it was that whole Trinity type mindset that, you know, we're all one, but we're separate, and we all have our own identity still. We all have a uniqueness, but we're still one church. Our worship times were 8:30, and 11, something like that. 8, 9:30, and 11. 8, 9:30, and 11. And we put the vision out there, kind of like what you had mentioned, that just because it's not your home church, if that time works for you, go to that service. And we had some families that started doing it. We had confirmation students that travel basketball was a huge thing down south, and they would play on Sundays. So on Sunday mornings, they might need to be in the cities at 11 o'clock, so they went to the 8 o'clock service, wherever it was, even if it wasn't their own congregation. We just made sure that we had offering envelopes that said each congregation's name on it, and they still dropped their offering envelope into that plate. It's just that the treasurers would divide them and they'd be delivered to the other congregation. The pastor would bring the offering to whichever congregation that offering belonged to. And we trusted we trusted one another, that would work. We really tried to make it a mindset of not of we're all three different, but we're one place. The other huge part was they were thinking, and at that time, I was an intern. They thought that I was leaving. It just happened that I ended up being able to be called there through some strings pulled both by Bishop Tom and Bishop Steve in southeastern Minnesota. So I was planning on leaving the day, like 4 days after they were going to vote on whether or not to be a parish. They were planning to try to do things as best they could to make a good environment for their leader, for whoever their pastors or whoever was going to be. So they thought about, rather than trying to put everything on one person, on trying to figure out multiple people. So our model was, I ended up being the lead pastor. We had a part-time associate position and then some support staff. The model was to be a team so that you're not trying to do everything by yourself. And so that if you have a pastor that has different giftings, like my gifting is not hugely into visitation, but I'm hugely gifted into youth. So I was focusing on the youth part, and our second position was focusing on visitation. So they were looking for people that were going to be able to work together. And we were not stuck on whether that person was going to be rostered, whatever the case was. We were open to whatever was going to work for our community and whatever was going to fit in what God was up to at that time and what we needed. So whether it was Sam, whether it was Deacon, whether it was pastor, whether it was layperson that we sent to ministry courses, whatever it was going to be, we were open to it. Because that's what it was going to be. We really had the mindset that this is an experiment. There's going to be times that we're going to fail. There's going to be things that aren't going to work. There's going to be times that we're never going to do that again. But we were open to the fact that there's going to be failures, there's going to be hardships, there's going to be times. We revised our parish agreement a couple times because as we wrote that agreement, when we went back and read it later, and we're like, well, we didn't really write that how we meant that. And then all three congregations were like, yeah, we need to fix that. That's not how that should work. So we were open to changing and revising to make it work to what we were. Initially, we had signed on to try this for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, we would see where it was and vote again. They voted to stay together. They've also voted, since I've left, they realized that having a pastor at three council meetings every month was too much. So they voted to form one council. And so they're doing one parish council now, and then they'll break off. They have their council members break off into separate groups at the end of the meeting to take care of congregation-specific business. We intentionally worded the question, and the same question was asked at all three congregations. Are you interested in exploring what it could look like to live into God's mission as a 3-point parish?
Say that again.
So, are you interested in exploring what it could look like to live into God's mission as a 3-point parish? It was somewhere along the lines. It probably wasn't exactly that, but it was.
You just had a show of hands.
And then just had a show of hands. Are you interested in talking?
Okay.
There will be a final vote on this at the end. But are you interested in exploring? And then we let them know that we're going to give you feedback on what we're talking about. We're going to be transparent and make sure you know these are the people that would represent you. So if you have questions, if you have concerns with what you've heard, these are the point people for you to ask. So that way you don't have, Bob asking Jim, who Jim heard from Sally that this was happening from this person, but Sally didn't actually hear that. She read it and completely construed it, and now it came from this person, but it really didn't. So these were the people that you asked about that. So I would encourage, if you guys haven't done that, to set that up, and make sure that everybody knows that you're in these conversations. Because if somebody finds out that you're having these conversations and they don't know, you're probably dead in the water because it feels inauthentic and it feels like you're behind their back. And you don't want that. You want it to be out and open and know this is what we're looking into.
Just had a question.
We kind of, like I said, we met every 2 weeks. So we would decide what we were going to discuss at the next meeting. And then people knew what was going to be discussed because we put it out there following. But we didn't have it laid out of this, and this, because you know what?
Knows.
With our, maybe one of those conversations is quicker and you have some extra time left, so you start on that next conversation, if you could, of what you're dreaming about, or how it might work. So, you know, it was just kind of, as we finish something, we'd move on to the next thing. And sometimes it was, oh, maybe we don't have time to start this one and we need to wait till next week. And we didn't meet for a full 3 hours, which was okay some days.
Right.
Our meetings were open.
Exactly, that's what
And
I'm saying.
other
It's an open
people-
meeting.
It's an open meeting, but you have 3 people that are going to be like they have the vote. You have 3 voters, but then you can have people that can come in that can weigh in, or they could say, you know, you could. We set it up so we were at a table, and you had the 3 from First Lutheran, you had the 3 from Deer Creek Valley, you had the 3 from Bethlehem, and then we had seats set up around the outside where, you know, the other people that came in, if they were interested in coming, they could come. And if, you know, like if I was like, you know, Joe, he teaches confirmation, he's been helping me with that, what do you think? And you can call on them to bring in their expertise to where they can come, but then you still have your 3 consistent that know what's been going on, because if you have somebody who hasn't been a part of the conversation in the other meetings, then they don't know what might have just been talked about the same way that somebody who's been there. Even though they may have read minutes, they haven't been a full part of that conversation. So I think you want to have 3 invested people that are like your vote, and it's weird to say voting members because you're not. You're ultimately making something to recommend to a congregation, so you're not really, you know, voting, but those are your 3 that are ultimately the voice for your church.
Working out the wording, figuring out what you'll put in your parish agreement, right? The goal would be at the end of this thing that you would have that paper.
Plan.
Yep, you'd have that paper, that agreement to bring back, and eventually there would be a vote at each of your parishes, or at each of your congregations on this parish agreement.